arranging this, and let's just turn it over to you, dear friend.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. I just came from the dentist, so this whole part of my face feels really weird. So I'll do my best. So I just wanted to share with you our project Feast. And then after I share just the bare bones about the project, I'll pass the time on to Dr. Laurie Anderson, who will talk more about the design about it. And then we'll go into breakouts where we can actually explore the resources we created together. And then we'll have an opportunity for you to sign up for these free resources that we would love for you to use with your students in schools. So long story short, the inspiration for Feast came from an old English proverb that says, enough is as good as a feast. So enough is as good as a feast. And this was a proposal that came out as a response to COVID-19. The USDA was quite concerned about the closures of schools and especially of school gardens and school farms. Many of you know, or if you don't, the USDA really supports Farm to School. It is their initiative. And they do a lot of funding for those of us who use school gardens. So they were really worried when people were going home and children were not in the school gardens or gardening anymore. And they wanted to continue. They saw a gap in the services, and they wanted to continue this. And so they put out this very last minute grant that was a response to develop educational experiences in the food and agricultural sciences during this time of social distancing. And so I roped in Dr. Laurie Anderson. So yes, this was all my crazy idea. And we came up with Feast, Food Experiences for Agricultural Science Training. And what it is 3 goals. The first one is to establish a professional development course for distance learning pedagogy. We all got thrown into this. And, a year ago, and we're struggling, we're just making things up as it went along, like, we'll do this and this and this. But if you take a step back and think about distance learning, it's actually been happening for many, many years. Like where you learn, think about maybe folks who might have correspondence. In the old days, you would be sent a book and you had to fill it out and send it back, and then someone grades you and give you a grade. So that's a distance learning resource. And now with digital technology, how can we use all this to come up with resources, agricultural science-based resources and learning for our children who are now at home? How do we use the home as a classroom? So goal 2 was to provide access to high quality learning materials. And then we continuously want to evaluate so we can improve it. So our deliverables are, we had a PD course in December, and you will meet 3 of our teacher authors. We selected 10 teacher authors to create these Feast workbooks. And during the breakouts, you get a close look at these fillable workbooks for students. And then we need to give out 21,000 of these books and toolkits to students grades 3 to 8 across the state of Hawaii and our sister state, island state of Guam. And we also wanted to have learning activities that are accessible to families. And in the spring of 2022, once we know that our formula worked, we will have a PDE 3 course that's open to all teachers on distance learning pedagogy. So last slide, what is a Feast toolkit? So this is my favorite show and tell. So so this is just a sample book. So like a fillable book, yeah? Like students write it in black and white, instructions, tables, blank tables to answer questions. You'll get to see a little bit more. The kit will come with other things like measuring tape. This is not the real one. This is just my sample. Magnifying lens. Seeds, really important that it comes with seeds, pipette, etc., etc., etc. And the lessons and activities in this book will address And Lori will go into this, so I'm going to stop talking. So Lori will go into the design of the resource and how we came up with these lessons and activities. But that's a Feast Toolkit. And we have 21,000 of these to give out for use during summer school, fall of 2021, and spring of 2022. So I'm going to stop sharing because Lori is going to go into the next part. So stop sharing. So thank you. I just wanted to briefly just share the project, and now over to Dr. Lori Anderson to share about the design of the instruction and the lessons. Lori, I think you're on mute.
What's the screensaver?
Okay. I'm unmuted now. My screen is showing. Okay, great. So thank you, Mingwei, for showing us the kit and what we're trying to get going here. So Mingwei and I work together with a team of 10 teachers. I'll try and make it fill the whole screen so it's easier to see. And
Lori, we're only seeing the screen of your
well, let me try again.
Okay.
Let's see, that one. How about that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I just want to make this slide big because it has some small things on it. So what I wanted to talk about are kind of the 4 big ideas that we have going on in the Feast books, that as we tried to translate, classroom instruction to things that students could do at home with little support from teachers, because we knew a lot of students were in those kind of situations. So one of the first things we had to talk about was, how do we pare down what we're doing to what is the most essential things? Because I think anyone who's tried to go to online instruction, you just can't get as many things done. You really have to go to what are those most important things, the essential things. So we looked at the curriculum and we categorized things in there as essential, desirable, or optional. And the essential things were the things that kids absolutely needed to be able to understand the learning outcomes. And those were the things that we wanted to be accessible to everyone. So we didn't want to have any technology requirements in there. Then we had some things that were desirable, that may be nice to have, but not absolutely necessary to learn. And those have some technology. And then some optional things that really are kind of like, the frosting on top of the cake, that they're really not required for the content. So by looking at that and kind of Marie Kondoing our curriculum, we were able to make the most important things accessible to everyone. The next thing was a model of interactions. We know that when we teach kids in the classroom, we're always asking them, talk to your neighbor, or we leading discussions. It's really hard to do those things when the students are remote. So the model of interactions shows that, instead of having the students interact with students in a classroom with a teacher, we can do other things. We can have other kinds of interactions to replace the interactions we would have in the classroom. So in Feast, we see interactions where maybe it says, talk to an adult or a friend and talk about the thing that they're learning, or, ask an elder about how they garden. So there are other interactions that are built into this curriculum so that students can get the feedback they need for learning and not have to rely on a classroom teacher for that. The third thing was, we wanted to focus on getting some of the NGSS in there, and specifically focusing on the cross-cutting concepts, because this is a kind of a new thing that a lot of curricula don't have. And they're very important because these cross-cutting concepts really are kind of the thinking tools for science. It's how scientists think about the world and how they make sense of things. And we broke those up into 3 categories of concepts. We have noticing, sense making, and modeling. So noticing is predominantly about patterns. What do we notice in the world around us as we're trying to figure out how a phenomena is happening? Modeling is about representing what we see and why it happens in some kind of a system model. And then sense making is really how we figure out why it's happening. We use big ideas in science like cause and effect, like energy and matter, and structure and function. So by using those three broad categories, it just gave us a framework to think about all of those cross-cutting concepts. There's 7 of them, and it kind of simplified them a little bit. And we didn't forget about the disciplinary core ideas and the science engineering practices. We just didn't emphasize that as much because those are more familiar to teachers. And the fourth thing, which probably was the most important thing, was the Hawaii School Garden curriculum map, because really that's where the scope and sequence comes from for the content in the books. And the curriculum map has 4 themes, which are these great icons that our graphic artist came up for us with the Feast project. So sense of place is about being rooted. So there's this picture of a root. And the living soil, living plant, we have a plant. We have nourishment, so we have the food in the bowl. We have nature's designs. These are all patterned after Ulu. When you can see the book covers, there's a real Ulu theme happening. So these are the 4 themes in the curriculum map, and all of the lessons that are in the book come from this curriculum map scope and sequence. Oops. To look at the cross-cutting concepts in a little more detail, I had the 3 noticing, sense making, and modeling in the previous slide. There really are 7 cross-cutting concepts. This shows them in a little more detail. If you were interested, there's a link to a video that CRDG made that explains them in a little more detail. It is one of the 3 next generation science standards dimensions. And so we do address them in the curriculum. And there is a teacher's guide that goes with the books where you can find out more about those things. Cross-cutting concepts can also make a sequence of learning. Like we said, they are ways of thinking in science. So how do scientists approach a problem? Well, first we see what we notice about it. We look for patterns. We look for things like scale, proportion, and quantity, what's changing, what's staying the same, and we find out what's happening in a phenomenon. Then what's the next phase? We try and make sense of it and figure out why it's happening. So we have these sense-making cross-cutting concepts, cause and effect, energy and matter, and structure and function. And then the last thing we have students doing is then sharing what they've learned by modeling the phenomena. So they use a representation and they explain what's happening. And so there's a lot of opportunity in the Feast books for students to model and to explain their ideas using pictures and words. And so I want to have more of the time for the teachers. So that's all I prepared for today. And if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to contact the project, and we'd be happy to help.